Wait, someone said NVIDIA is moving? Hold up, back that up. She's down about $2. What's going on? What's up? What's going on, Randy? NVIDIA is down $2. Let's see. How is she gonna screw everybody? Bulls and bears. Watch her stay flat. What's going on, Hamid? Everyone says that NVIDIA is gonna be the reason why the market moves in one direction or the other, not FOMC. Well, we'll see what reality is. But today's price action was definitely a pretty solid ending. I kind of expected continuation. I kind of mentioned that yesterday off of the price action that we had, the recovery that we had from the lows of yesterday's price action. I kind of, just briefly just name dropped the fact that I expected more continuation to the upside here. And so we basically got our continuation. It took a lot longer than expected because of the fact that the market just went sideways until we got what the market wanted to hear. We got all the Fed stuff that we wanted that was pretty much already known. Nothing was a surprise off of the FOMC minutes. Therefore, you saw the little stagnant movement, but once it took time, just went vertical there after that 2 o'clock FOMC minute. So beautiful price action today. I think it more so went how I expected. Unfortunate part was I kind of did nap through most of that, I want to say, just because I had a little bit of a headache. So I took a little bit of a nap, woke up, beautiful sight to see though, and that was amazing. What's going on, Emil? What's going on, Lobo? So beautiful way for the market to just move here. When is the market going to bounce, Krishna? That depends. What do you consider bouncing? Because I mean, we're actually up quite a bit today. So if you're asking maybe are you expecting more continuation on the upside? Because you had an amazing recovery yesterday, beautiful continuation today. Now here comes tomorrow. Do we get more continuation on the back end of NVIDIA earnings? Which right now it still feels stagnant. If you probably heard me talking with Avery a few minutes ago, after the market closed there, before I hopped on live, I kind of did say that I was expecting NVIDIA to kind of just screw both sides, bulls and bears, being that it's going to likely end up being flat. Not the fact that it's going to end up being, say, bad earnings or extremely good earnings. It's just that what you would say is maybe profit taking. You're going to see some profit takers step in. But then I think that by morning, granted the fact that you're going to have maybe an overnight dip, whatever may be the case with futures, you're going to see some upgrades come out on NVIDIA. And that'll likely be the sense where NVIDIA probably goes crazy tomorrow for that matter. All right. So that's kind of just my hindsight, what I'm expecting. Obviously, we see it's down about a near $3, but I think that's barely nothing for this. They have their earnings call that doesn't even start for the next, I think, just under an hour here or so at 5 p.m. is when I heard it actually starts. So a long ways to go. Their guidance is going to be very telling. Now, if this for whatever reason does flush, that's going to be very concerning. The level that I think I had that I was still marked up and still remaining here is this 162, 163. I want to see if that ends up holding ultimately. Otherwise, if she can't hold that 160, well, that 163, I do have this coming down towards 159, and ultimately she'll end up cracking to pretty much test the low that we have from May 20th, which is sitting at 157.5. So that's what I would look for in terms of that. That could potentially drag the markets just a bit if Nvidia and the rest of the semis just tank. That would be the flip side scenario. All right. Let me phrase. When is the market going to go bull? It's been bear for some time now. Krishna, we have not found a bottom. I'll be honest with you. There's not a bottom just yet. Uh, According to what I'm pretty much looking at, I have SPY going down towards 372. How long that's gonna take to get us there? That's pretty much the golden question right now. So I think until June is over, Krishna, the bear market still is alive and very much so. All right. And that's why I even tweeted out, you heard me tweet a time after time, like, now's the time where if you're not day trading, you're not playing it week to week, day to day, and you don't feel comfortable with those circumstances, in which just the market is just moving not to your comfort level, now's the time where you just pretty much look to save up your money. You wait for that bear market to pretty much be over. But unfortunately, you may have to go about another month here before this is likely said and done. All right. Mr. Seriously, I am bullish on NVIDIA overall. I'm not gonna lie, I do think that their earnings are gonna be completely fine. My only concern was that I don't think that since it was so everyone's eyes are on the earnings here. I think you're going to see more profit taking, which is going to keep it relatively flat to red here tonight before upgrades likely send it soaring tomorrow, which I think is going to be running all day tomorrow. That's my hindsight of what I expect. All right. But other than that, I think I mentioned yesterday, I kind of gave you guys this formation. I've been dropping charts and ideas pretty much left and right with most of the most common names that you guys all like pretty much. You had that beautiful little descending broadening wedge. You had the beautiful breakout here. What a candle that was at the open. You had a beautiful downtrend break at the open. You had the nice push, you had that beautiful retest, and there was your continuation. Choppy through most of the day for that uptrend, but nonetheless, beautiful continuation right into my next supply zone that I had at that 169, call it 170 flat. Above this, that next key level that I was watching here was going to be 174. So 174 would likely be more so in play tomorrow in my estimation. And that's where I say the red to green effect likely takes place going into tomorrow. So 174 would be that target. That looks to be where we had that prior distribution, basically. A little bit of a support to resistance level between May 19th up until May 20th. So that's pretty much my confluence. You kind of actually hit that level very repeatedly between a head and shoulders that you had dating back towards May 13th. As you see that head and shoulders right now, that was that confluence level, that 174, in which you pretty much hit that resistance to support very frequently. All right. So 174 is my upside there. If this really wanted to soar, then the next level you're likely looking at is 178 half, and above that we'll be looking at that May 17th high that created the head for the head and shoulders pattern. All right, and that's what I'll be looking at for that. Real quick, switching over to SPY real quick. I'll give you just what I saw from hindsight. Kind of looking at the last in the power hour there, in which case, I did mention I kind of slept through quite a bit of this. I want to say more so. But nonetheless, it was quite the spot that we ended up stopping. As you see, I have a pretty well-defined downtrend resistance that we sat on. We hit that right into the power hour, halfway through that power hour, and that's when you saw the rejection, and you heard Sig talking about the fact that I believe whatever particular spot that it was when I hopped on live, he said, this is where you want to see it bounce. Unfortunately, we do have a little bit of a rising wedge action as well. You see the little blue formation that I have, a little rising wedge action. We could potentially come down to support as low as this 394 half, and then hopefully we end up breaking north of that rising wedge. Because I would hate to see is that we end up breaking south of it, which is entirely possible. We can get a little red to green action tomorrow. You dip below that 394 half, maybe come down as low as 392 half, in which that'll be quite the dip that we'll get tomorrow morning, and then retest the downtrend resistance before we push to make our way towards that gap fill sitting at 404. All right, and that's entirely possible for that to happen. And maybe that might end up being contingent upon NVDA and with the semiconductor sector in general. All right, that may end up dragging us down towards that 392 half. So that's just your likely scenarios. Ultimately, though, I do think that we're going to end up breaking north of this downtrend resistance, and then we're going to be making our way, and we'll be ultimately talking about this 404 spot for the gap fill. All right, and that's pretty much just looking at that. I'll get to your shop and CrowdStrike in just a quick sec. I just want to point out one other one that was pretty much just kind of caught my attention here, into the close as well, and that was basically looking at Microsoft. If you actually notice, I had a beautiful downtrend resistance as well on Microsoft. That actually sent us soaring right through that downtrend resistance off of FOMC. You pushed right in through halfway towards our gap fill that we had. That dates back to May 18th. But what was actually very interesting and actually gave me a little bit more of a comfort level in terms of how we ended the day, you retested the downtrend resistance not as support, and we ended up bouncing beautifully right off of that. So that to me was definitely a positive sign. I do think that we're gonna end up getting continuation into that gap fill and completing it. My bad, guys. One quick sec. All right. So that was another one key indication. I was watching that just a peculiar spot that it ended up retesting as support from breaking that as resistance. That actually left me saying that we should get continuation on this, at least to the gap fill here. In which case maybe that's a gap up that we get. Obviously, you want to see it pretty much get continuation above the gap fill. At a certain point, that's only about a $3 upside you're looking at for completion of gap fill. But then pretty much what's the next level in play? We want to see if we could take out this wick back from May 17th here. That wick high is sitting at 268. So from current level, that's about a near $6 upside. And then potentially we're looking at hitting into resistance at 269 half. 269.38 would be where I'm particularly looking at. So I kind of mentioned that today Microsoft was likely going to be end up being the leader. It just may so wasn't the case. Amazon, Tesla, they had quite the day, but it was a good sign that Microsoft and Apple still held up nonetheless. All right. Let me take a look at CrowdStrike for you. I think I remember Avery actually talking about this one. I think he was. I'll take off whatever I have on my chart. Let's see what we're looking at. Oh, this is actually kind of pretty, I will say. So it looks like you have a little bit of a bear pennant action going on here. I will say. It looks like a bear pennant to me. Let's see if we get that. And then we get our support level sitting. Yeah, I actually do like this. This is a beautiful little bear pennant that's going on there, V. I don't mind this one at all. Obviously, you pretty much want to break under where you had a little bit of a double bottom type action here. You want to crack under this 136 level. 136 is going to be that key level for you to break under, for you to pretty much enter puts because you do not want to get wicked out. Maybe you wick under 136, and then that's not going to be where you want to get pretty much stopped out. So I would wait for the break under 136. Unfortunately, that's about a $10 downside that you're waiting on. Otherwise, you do end up risking continuing to be in this wedge, in which case, I also do see that earnings are coming up on the third. But what's usually end up, and this is going to kind of maybe depend upon market volatility kicking back into the market here, is that you can, if the market remains neutral to bullish here right now, you could end up staying in this wedge for quite some time, and that's not going to be a pretty chop zone. All right, and I'm assuming you're likely looking for a bigger move than pretty much the distance from support to resistance there, V. So, in my estimation, you wait for the breakdown under 136. Otherwise, if this ends up going bullish with the broader market here, you're watching this to break over 154 half, and then that'll give you your upside action. All right. And that's pretty much the two ways that I would look at it. But with earnings approaching, if the market stays neutral to bullish, it's entirely possible that it stays within this wedge until the earnings report ends up giving it that directional break up or down. That's the only cautious part about that. All right. And hopefully that kind of gave you your insight of what you are particularly maybe looking at. The other one you mentioned was shop. I haven't looked at shop. Let's see. I think I looked at it maybe yesterday. I think I did. Let's see what we're looking at with shop. Looks like I did have it outlined. Why does it look like my lines actually moved though? All right. Nonetheless, I'm actually delete whatever I had here. Scratch that. Let's see what we're looking at. What I'm particularly looking at is a very nice downtrend support level. That's actually one thing that just stood out to me in particular. So a very defined downtrend support level. Obviously, you see where you had the reversal and you ended up bouncing off of that. The other factor is now determining where is your resistance sitting at. Let's see if we can find our resistance level now. From the body of the candle to the next body of the candle, you are basically just flashing over your downtrend resistance right now. So level that you want to see this pretty much break over would be breaking over right here, would be breaking over 342. If you can get over 342, then that's going to be pretty much an easy ride up towards testing gap fill at that 355 spot. That would be the way that I would pretty much look to play this. You get that break over that 342. From 342, you take that to 355 to test the gap fill. And that's quite the distance that you're looking at, which is pretty much about a $14 move, $14 upside to test the gap fill is what you'll be watching. I do see that it is down after hours though. That's the only concern right now. In terms of downside price action, you want to see this hold 320. As long as it holds 320, then you get that upside. Otherwise, if this fails to hold 320, then you're gonna end up taking out this low back from May 12th, in which this is likely gonna end up creating even more lows. So I know this has been one that we've pretty much made a lot of money off of the cloud alerts that we've had recently. This one has just been non-stop flushing. I don't think there's necessarily a bottom that I can say right now that I feel comfortable about just yet. But stretching this out to the weekly, the bottom that kind of stood out to me just a bit was sitting down at 297. So, you do see a little bit more of a downside. Um, how soon it's going to be getting here. will likely be determined upon market volatility. But 320 that needs to hold, and then you end up seeing that 342 break, and you take it up towards 355 to test gap fill. Is what I would say. All right. Could I do Costco? See, I was gonna look at the next ticker that you mentioned until you said AMC, and I was like, ew, why do I want to look at that? All right. Looking at Costco. Actually, I already had this one plotted out. That was actually pretty interesting. Let me actually go back out to the daily. All right. So daily pretty much tells me, obviously you see the nice little highlighted trend line support that you had off of the daily here, large degree. Once you ended up breaking that 518, that was literally you just broke hellfire right there. And obviously you see where you're sitting at currently right now, almost about $100 down. Now, where do we end up going from here? You see the nice little reversal that you had, put in that beautiful hammer that you got in from May 20th. Now, what you end up particularly doing that I expect is that you're going to end up retesting what you had as a pretty solid consolidation here for most of August to October of last year. That's going to end up being the resistance spot. And that's why you see I have that green arrow sitting here roughly around that 449 half spot is what I'm looking at, which gives you about a $9 upside from current level. So 449 half would be where I would expect this to end up taking its U-turn, and then you would get that downside action. I do see, however, you do have earnings as well. That may end up being potentially what's your downside. It would likely end up being the earnings. So hopefully this ends up being about a $9 earnings run up as we approach that earnings here on the 20. That's actually going to be on the 26th going into tomorrow. Wow. So we may end up getting a nice push out of this. You might actually be looking at a potential $9 move right into that resistance at that 449, and that'll be a beautiful earnings run up. Nice catch on that one, Kevin. So I'll actually drop this one on my watch list here for tomorrow. This may be a beautiful earnings run up, especially if the market stays neutral to bullish as I was expecting. And 449, and at 449, I think it may warrant getting an earnings lotto for this. I don't want to kind of say you should play earnings because you never should. But if you're a gambler, I think Costco puts actually pay here. I'll be honest with you. That would be where my bet would stay. But 449 would likely need to hit before I actually say that you should do a earnings put on that. Because maybe you end up staying relatively flat to red here tomorrow. And then you get that quick little pop towards 449 before it ends up giving it back up. All right. Well, it was a random run, but no need to do the other one. Thanks for Costco. AMC has not been getting the love that I want to say. For AMC, if I were to actually tell you if you're looking for memes, honestly, the way to go is GME. I think that's the better route. That's why you actually heard me saying like, wow, GME was actually up $24. I think there's more attention, and that's not more so a crowded area as AMC is. I think you can get more bang for your buck going out to play in GME than AMC. All right. Let's see the other one you mentioned, Christian. You want me to take a look at Myrna? I have not looked at Moderna in quite a while. Every time I look at Moderna, I hope that I can kind of like make a bull case for this, and then somehow it just feels like it's not necessarily a bull case. Um, First thing that kind of caught my attention was hopefully making a higher low here off of today's price action. And then what would end up happening is that you potentially look to get a inverted head and shoulders. That's kind of the first thing that just caught my attention. If I just draw it out real quick, that was literally the first thing that just glanced out to me. In which case, you would hope that ends up playing out. That's literally the first thing that literally just caught my attention. Does that mean that's gonna end up happening? That's left to be seen because obviously I said you need to make a higher low off of today's price action. The other thing that I don't particularly like right now is that you have a well-defined downtrend off of this one, a well-defined downtrend resistance. Until this ends up breaking over this 143 spot, I literally would stay short and I would remain short on Moderna here. That would be just my case right now. NVDA earnings are out. Whoa, glance at that. That got slaughtered. All right. So what does this do for the broader market now? That ends up likely taking out AMD to the downside. That likely ends up taking out SPY. As you see, it's already flushing to the downside here as well. And what that ultimately tells me that's going to end up happening is that we're likely going to end up testing that 392 half, in which case we're going to end up breaking down out of this rising wedge, probably consolidating just a bit off of that 392 half spot where we may end up basing. And then hopefully, I would say hopefully, we can retest the downtrend resistance and break to end up pushing north in continuation towards the testing the gap to level 404. Otherwise, if we can't hold 392 half, that gets ugly. And then you can literally just put this right back under 390. 390, then 383, and then you're already looking back at the May 20th low that's sitting at this 380 spot. So that definitely changes a lot right now for the entire broader market. That was not a pretty flush. I'm assuming guidance was probably the play that ended up making this to the downside here. I kind of expected the fact that they would end up beating. I was just hoping that the guidance would likely hold it up at least to the bare minimum, red to flat. But that was just not the case. So kind of gives you your picture right now. 392 half needs to hold on SPY. We see if that holds on the breakdown of the rising wedge to retest downtrend resistance. Otherwise, that's pretty much your line in the sand. 392 half. We break below. We pretty much remain. We go back to being bearish. All right. But real quick, my bad for cutting you off, Krishna. Looking at Moderna again, I was pretty much just saying, uh, very well defined downtrend resistance. Not something I particularly like. You want to see this pretty much put in a higher low off of this tomorrow, in which case you want to see that higher low above that 126.28 spot that we put in a low of today, and then that would hopefully give you that curl right back up to pretty much validate that inverted head and shoulders, and then you'll potentially break over this 142 half, which is your well-defined downtrend resistance. All right, and that's how I would go about playing that. Otherwise, if you can't make a higher low at the bare minimum tomorrow, I think you look to pretty much get this right back under 123 half, and that you can literally just play the downside and remain bearish with a defined downtrend resistance in place. All right. So can I back to McDonald's for you? Let me take a peep. I'm assuming you said back to McDonald's since I probably looked at it before. I'm assuming that's why you said it like that, but I'll take a peep at it. What is McDonald's doing here? I do have this well-defined support level. I don't know exactly when or how I ended up drawing this, but 227 high was that level you wanted to see. Obviously, you see this holding pretty darn well right now. Let me see the smaller time frame, which I do think that you have a well-defined downtrend resistance here as well. Let's see if we can plot that out. So downtrend resistance that you're sitting at, you're basically looking at this to pretty much break over 247 half. If you can't break 247 half, then this basically looks to be a flush right back under 242 half, and you could write puts right into that. That's basically what I say. So either 247 half breaks, you go continue to go north, or you take this right under 242 half, and this ends up being your downside. So pretty much black and white right there. Were we working at McDonald's after the video dump? Mr. Seriously, are you holding you're holding you're holding the video calls. Yikes. Very tough. I know that I saw some actually holding lotto puts. I think Tay in our chat pretty much was talking about Nvidia puts. If I'm not mistaken, Dan from our server, he's also taking lotto puts on Nvidia. There was more puts on Nvidia than there were calls. I just thought that the earnings would actually be pretty much respectable, that it would hold it up pretty red to flat until at least tomorrow morning. But that just wasn't the case. So sorry to hear that you're pretty much holding calls on Nvidia didn't go your way. Again, though, their earnings call is at 5 o'clock. Let's see what their guidance is. It's a little bit early. We could still end up screwing the Bears right now, even though it looks kind of convincing. It's down double digits right now. Let's wait to see what their earnings call is going to say. Let's see how they guide. That's going to be the most important part right now, is what I would say. All right. Guidance 10% down. All right, I take that back a little bit. You definitely got that covered. So if they guided down, then that explains why it's down as much as it is. Because if it was just pretty much an earnings loss, for whatever reason, then I can understand being down single digits. But down double digits, it had to be guidance that took it down as that much. So that definitely pretty much sinks it. You're gonna end up basically breaking down this May 12th low. That's not gonna be pretty. If I look at the weekly, and I'm basically just gonna clean out my chart here real quick. If I'm looking for the breakdown, next level of support that you're really watching, next major support level would be this 152 low, 152.33 ish would be where you're looking at. Below that, that basically takes you down all the way towards 146 half. And if this actually stays as bloody as it looks right now, I honestly think that 146 half could be realistic tomorrow, and that might end up being the play tomorrow. All right, and that's still about $11 down from current level. So when it's all said and done tomorrow, if it holds down double digits here by morning, we could see this down $20 plus tomorrow, and that's not going to be pretty for the broader market. All right. So that's what I will say. Other than that, those are just pretty much the names that just stood out to me. Apple, Microsoft, pretty much the leaders here today. Hopefully you guys kind of caught the call out that I mentioned on Tesla, that 634 break this morning. That was just a beaut this morning. One other one that's pretty much standing out to me as well, alongside Microsoft, was Apple. Obviously, you can see the well-defined downtrend resistance as well. Look at where you rejected right off of that downtrend resistance. In which case, I want to see this pretty much hold tomorrow. If we can hold 138 low, then we could potentially retest the downtrend resistance. But given the fact of how semiconductor sector looks right now, it's not looking too promising to basically retest our downtrend resistance and end up getting continuation to the upside. So that's left to be seen. That's what we really want to see tomorrow morning, is how much of a downside are we looking at with the semiconductor space just pretty much weighing us down. All right. Did I look at Tesla? I wasn't gonna necessarily look at Tesla too much. But other than that, I pretty much just have two simple things right here. Right now, a very well-defined downtrend resistance. Obviously, you saw the beautiful push that you had. We ended up hitting into that very devil number when I pretty much was calling it out. That was basically when it smacked at 11 a.m. this morning. It literally hit right into the devil's number at that 666. And then we ended up getting a dip right back to our support level that 653 held. And we saw the beautiful push. So tomorrow I'm gonna look to see if we end up getting a push north of 673. 673 needs to break, and then we're looking at downtrend resistance at 694. Otherwise, if we can't hold 653, I honestly think that we're likely going down to test 600 by the end of the week. All right, that's pretty much just the two ways I look at it. Either you're going to 694 or you're going down to 600. In which case I have my support at 597 is what I'm looking at. All right. So hopefully that kind of helped you out there, Randy. Any thoughts on DLTR earnings guidance tomorrow morning? E. I have not looked at that one. I think we actually had some flow on that, if I'm not mistaken. No, it was Dollar Gen that we had bullish flow on. Take that back. Let me see the weekly or the daily chart on this. Damn, that's a disgusting breakdown. All right, so one thing that's pretty much very noticeable was that you also had a ascending broadening wedge action that pretty much you broke down off of. That was pretty much the most noticeable thing here, just looking at this chart, because I have not looked at this in quite a very long time. That's just off the glance right now. You had a beautiful ascending broadening wedge, and obviously you see the big breakdown that you had. Now, if I were to say the upside potential that you have sitting on Dollar Tree right now, is I would look to pretty much retest this 143 spot. That gives you about a $10 upside. And why do I say to basically retest that 143? If you actually notice, for the most part of, what is this, from November up until, I want to say, February of this year, what was your pretty much very relative resistance that you're sitting at is right around this 144 spot. So 144 looks to be like your upside, to be more precise. That was the level that you hit your head on as resistance multiple times. No, late November, again in early January, and then you broke out in March, early March. So that would be the level I would expect to pretty much retest. That's the level of also the gap fill that it broke down on. I would hopefully look to see if it retested that spot. I wouldn't be too promising on that ended up happening though, because what ends up looking disgusting is that you have a gap fill above that 144, but what's more, even more ugly, is that you have a gap fill below. And the problem that I actually see is that inflation is likely going to end up pretty much being a factor for Dollar Tree. I think it's going to be even more costly for their margins right now, because imagine if they only sell things at such a cheap rate at only a dollar to maybe a dollar and change right now. It only seems fitting that at some point in time their margins are going to be very minimal, or they're going to end up having to raise prices. That's my concern. So I'm actually more so leaning to the fact that this breaks down and we likely at least the bare minimum test the gap fill down instead at 121 low. All right. And that's what I would look at. By the way, last week you said snow will go to 113. It happened. Oh, well, I'm actually glad that ended up happening. I do not remember actually mentioning that about snow. I'm not gonna lie. I do say a lot of things. I probably go through a million tickers. And actually, yeah, I think I remember actually looking at this one now because it's the ticker with this fat megaphone looking action. In which case, yeah, it's actually right down at the support of this megaphone at this 113. At this, yeah, it's 115 plus market, just about 115. So I like it. My only concern is it really gonna hold here? Because I'm not too convinced that it's gonna end up holding this downtrend support level, especially with the broader market. So it would not shock me that we end up breaking down below that trendline support, and this ultimately at some point in time goes under $100. Would not surprise me. That's pretty much just a gut feeling. But obviously from this current level right now to your downside, it looks like nothing but thin air right now. So take that with a grain of salt. All right. But other than that, pretty much just glancing back at NVIDIA. I mean, it's actually rebounding just a bit, but we'll see. Call is about to start in about 20 minutes or so. We'll see what impacts are really just bothering them, and what's any more details that they can give on that guidance that they pretty much guided down on. But that's likely going to end up hurting the broader market here. And 392 again, 392 half is still that line in the sand for me, whether we remain bullish or we pretty much go back to being bearish. That's that line in the sand for me. That's pretty much the bottom line I can say. Looking at pretty much the overall broader market at the end of the day here. All right. So I'll kind of wrap it up there. We'll leave it as is. We'll see what how the semis end up holding up by morning, or if they pretty much send the market crashing with the entire sector. That's going to be what I think everyone's eyes are going to be on the first thing that they wake up tomorrow. All right, but I'll leave it short and sweet right there. I think today was pretty solid day. I know the cloud alerts pretty much, except for I believe Facebook, everything else literally just went north. We had the Q's fire on the clouds. We had NVIDIA fire on the clouds. Spy flower, spy fired on the clouds, and that all ended up paying. So pretty solid day. The other thing also, if I don't think anyone noticed, the flow alerts should be up on the website as well. If you also notice, we do have sell to open as well. So that actually kind of gives you where you have those sell orders that do end up flipping those names to pretty much being bullish. Those are basically your bearish orders are being sold for the most part. And so those are some things that are pretty much also added on the flow alerts as well right now. So hopefully you guys can pretty much take advantage on that and see how they react to price action. All right. But other than that, I'll leave it at a wrap right there. I'll see you guys on live tomorrow morning. Appreciate you guys joining me, and hopefully I was able to